how difficult is it right now for French police to track down these two suspects?
Well, it's always very difficult. When this starts, as everything started yesterday when these crimes were committed, an assortment of things are going on. First of all, they're going in and trying to tend to people who were hurt and wounded and killed. And they're trying to make sure that there aren't more people there, there's not a continuing threat. And then they're trying to start the process of securing the scene and collecting forensic evidence. That's important because facts come from forensic evidence, and it could be either important in leading you to the people who committed these crimes, or if not that, it could certainly be helping convict them eventually. After that, you start the interview process, and that interview process takes place inside where the crimes were committed. You talk to people who actually saw things happen, and then it goes outside, and eventually it builds from there. And by the time several hours pass, you have a command structure in place, you have an analytical structure in place, and a tremendous amount of information is coming your way. You have to sort through it quickly. You have to try and distinguish between fact and fiction and myth and theory. And then you have to start going back out to the public and trying to give them information that's going to help you solve these crimes. So there's all kinds of activity going on, and it just gets bigger from there, and it spreads across the country. And in the case of a terror act, it spreads around the world, because essentially what you're doing is you're investigating crimes. And when you add the aspect of a terrorism crime, you're also adding intelligence agencies, national security agencies, and you're collaborating with other countries. Everybody goes on high alert when something like this happens, because we never know if something's going to follow in another location.
So let's assume for a moment that this holdup at a gas station north of Paris earlier this morning by two people who resemble the suspects was in fact perpetrated by the killers. If that is the case, and police have, or authorities in general have, a pretty good idea more or less where they are, should we expect them to be apprehended in short order?
Well, we would hope so, and it certainly would look like that if you're standing on the outside. But I will take you back to the Erik Robert Rudolph fugitive hunt in the mountains of North Carolina. We were literally hours behind him, and it was 5 years before he was arrested. And I think that when he was arrested, he was identified eventually by a rookie police officer out in the middle of the mountains early in the morning. So you never know what's going to happen when you have a break like this. But right now it does appear that the French population is certainly watching this. They're behind the police. They're reporting what's going on. Let's go back to the Boston Marathon bombing. You saw the very same thing happen there in the day and 2 days out from the actual crimes. You started seeing the authorities closing in. You started seeing them going into neighborhoods, talking to people, and eventually, and other crimes, in fact, were committed. A police officer was killed in the process of that. So there's a lot going on right now. It's a dangerous time in that these people are on the run. They're going to stay on the run, and they're probably going to fire back when they're surrounded or found.
It is a dangerous time, and we've heard that the newspaper plans to stay operational on schedule and go to print next week. Is that a dangerous decision? Should they just simply shut down until these two suspects are captured and things quiet?
Well, that's a great question. It may be very dangerous, but it's about freedom. And I think that more and more in the last couple of days, we hear a lot of people talking about that. And I'll take you back to Unabomb. In the Unabomb case, the big break came after the Washington Post and the New York Times collaborated, and obviously they were taking risk to go ahead and publish the Unabomb manifesto. They did that after meeting with FBI agents, the FBI director, and discussing this in detail. And you see the same thing happening today, and not just the situation in France and the place actually in the middle of this, but in newspapers and in news outlets all over the world. I think that this is the best message that we could ever give to terrorists, if it's a message from a free society, and that's that we're going to continue doing what we do. We're going to continue being open and honest and have dialogue, and we're not going to let you do what you'd like to do, which is to shut us down and stop us from talking.
Terry, yesterday I asked former CIA Director Jim Woolsey if this was a failure of French intelligence. Now that we know one of the main suspects is a well-known jihadist who had spent time in and out of the court system, can we say that? Is it a failure of French intelligence?
Well, Some people will say that, and I don't want to make excuses because I've been there, but I will say this. We spend a lot of time beating each other up when something like this happens. I think perhaps we need to understand that this is the state of play every day, whether you're in France or Great Britain or America. There are literally hundreds, maybe thousands of people that have been looked at, and we've had to walk away because there was nothing else to do. We took it as far as it could go. Or have perhaps been a problem and maybe an ongoing problem, but there are only so many people on the front lines to deal with these. And you have to make quick judgments, and you have to make fast calls, and then you have to move on and hope that you're right. And this is the state of play of terrorism today, and I think people need to understand that. You know, there's a saying that just about everybody that works in terrorism will talk to you about at some point in time. And that's this isn't like Major League Baseball. When you bat 500, you're doing really well. Batting 500 or batting 950 or 990 in the field of terrorism means that something dramatic and awful is probably going to happen. One thing getting through out of 900 is just not acceptable. And yet we're all human, and that's what's going to happen. And so we have to understand that the world is going into a perhaps phase of time when terrorism is going to be with us, and when these things happen, I think it's sometimes better to hold our judgment, and I certainly would never criticize at this stage of the game, maybe no stage of the game, what the French have done, did do, or didn't do, because it seems like they've certainly made some real progress in the last 24 hours.